If manifestation is simply about what you believe to be true, then we would never be blindsided by people. We would never hear things like, wow, I don't understand. He seemed like such a nice man. But then the police raided his house and it turns out he had women chained up and he just was the nicest guy. When everybody in a community sees and knows somebody, a pastor, for example, who then turns out to be doing some horrific things behind the scenes, when everybody believes that the person is a do-gooder or is a pinnacle or a light for society, and then they find out that actually they were behaving in ways that were unfathomable. I remember once I received a comment on a TikTok video, and somebody essentially touting this, what I believe is a repetitive cliche, that what you believe is what comes true. And we got into it a little bit because I found it to be almost like a parroting wisdom, collective wisdom, that indeed sometimes this is the case, right? But in my personal experience, and perhaps in yours too, what I have observed is that when you are dealing with people, people are like portals. And the lessons that they represent comes in a fashion of a doorway. And the door has an artifice to it, right? It might even have a very, very thick facade. And then you start to go through the threshold and everything seems okay. Everything might even seem ordinary and kosher, right? And then you start to progress into this reality with them. And the next thing you know, you're chained up in a basement in Ohio. What's going on? You see, if reality was simply a matter of what we believed to be true, then we would never get into car accidents, right? We would never be stolen from. We would never have calamities with people. We would never be afraid of hitchhiking. Back in the day, there was like no problem with that, right? So how does it work, really? It doesn't work to just hold to false beliefs and to say, well, what you believe is what comes true. Because as I've mentioned before, every mother would have the worst thing happen to their children. And I believe that if genuinely it was all about your vibration and your belief system, then anytime a mother felt fear, she would catalyze that into reality. And so there'd be a lot of children that were deformed, that didn't make it, that had something horrific happen to them. And indeed, actually, our species seems to be wired for survival. And there's something very protective about our genes. Of course, there's always a threshold, right? And there's something amazing about being young, like you get bruised or banged up, and for the most part, you walk away unscathed. Psychologically, you might have some things to work out in adulthood, but for the most part, we all make it, right? And so if it's a matter of belief and your vibration, then nothing bad would ever happen to anybody. Or if you had fear, like mothers and fathers have a lot of fear, then everything bad would happen to you or to your child. And that's not the case. So how does it work? Why do people say it's about your belief system? It's because there is a portion of it, a large portion of it, that is about your belief system. For example, if you feel that you are not deserving of being treated well, if you feel that you are not deserving of whatever your heart's desire is, then you will actually self-sabotage and create realities to prove that to you. Because what happens is that 9 times out of 10, especially in the beginning, you will be shown why your belief system is wrong. You will actually be shown so many examples of why you are deserving, why you are worth it, why you should go for it. But it is a negative thought loop that is entrained in your brain for a lot of people, entrained in the brain to ignore those or to turn them into something that they were never meant to be. And people actually rewrite their memories. This is the craziest thing. They actually rewrite their memories. And the brain is so adept at zeroing in and deciding in advance what reality should be. This has been proven. Literally, it does this. That it pre-selects for what it thinks you should experience. And so if you are preferentially seeing the world as full of people that are taking advantage of you, I knew somebody like this, that literally, side by side, me, who doesn't have that belief system, them who did, or do, presumably, we don't talk anymore. But we witness the same event and literally have different interpretations of it. Oh, they're trying to scam me out of this 50 cents. I can't believe it. It's like, what? Did we see the same event? Because I literally didn't see any of that. And so what happens is that people will actually write over reality. They will literally write over it. And this creates a blinding. And this is why bad things happen to good people. Because when you have a belief set like I do, where I see the good in people, and it's really peculiar because I've noticed that I've had errors in my judgment that have been really embarrassing. I have to just own it, really, really, really embarrassing. But at the same time, it's like I can feel the potential of people, but it doesn't mean that that potential is going to be realized. And so it's this really fine dance of seeing people's shadow, understanding their potential, but not understanding always how close they are to that potential, or if that potential is going to be realized. I've seen the darkest of the dark of people, and yet I still have this undying belief and trust as a default, which is kind of endearing until you're chained up in a basement. I've never been chained up in a basement. I've had some close calls. I've had some really close calls. So, and too close for comfort, we'll say. So the point is that there's something that happens from our processing of the external world and our internal housing, assuming that this is where it takes place. And leading cognitive evolutionary neuroscientists say that the neurons that are supposed to exist in our brain that I learned about in graduate school actually aren't there unless you look at them. And so that raises a lot of questions about how this processing of consciousness actually occurs and whether or not it occurs inside the skull as I was trained that it does. So just FYI, that's an emerging question mark. But there's something that happens where you and another person side by side can see the same event and interpret it wildly differently. And that's because the way that you and that other person are wired, fundamentally, the way that you believe that the world operates is fundamentally different. I then believe, and this is just a personal opinion based on my own anecdotal experiences, I believe that those people who see the world vastly differently actually, unless they stay linked together, go in different worlds. And sure, I mean, you can talk on the telephone, kind of old-fashioned, but you can text, Snapchat, still stalk each other on social media, but that doesn't mean you're in the same world. You see what I mean? Presumably, there's some overlap in the area networks and the telecommunication systems, but that's just a belief I have. I don't have any evidence or any knowledge to make that claim. And so if you stay linked to them, though, this is where it gets interesting. Then I believe that you slip into the world that predominantly is co-created by the relationship. So that could be slipping into person A's world, and then you start to see things very, very negatively, and you take on their belief system, right? Like if they're very powerful and very influential, and if you happen to have a personality type that's susceptible to people like that, then you could actually train your brain to see things the way that they do. Like, for example, I was following some conspiracy things, and I like to educate myself on different perspectives. And I was doing a little research project, and towards the end of it, I received a publication on, I think it was Substack, of this content creator that was talking about his son, and his son was like 16 years old, not going to social events because of some technology that could be seen from the road. I don't want to say what it is. That something happened around 2020 that people started saying that those metal things sticking up in the sky with like blinking lights had something to do with the big P. And I still don't fully understand it, but there was this content creator that was so influential on his son. And this is when I unsubscribed, and I was like, I don't think I can witness this anymore. It was one piece out of many that I was like, this is too much for me. The 16-year-old was like, I'm not going to go and hang out with my friends and go bowling because there's a lot of those metal things on the route, and they make me sick, and they actually make me nauseous to be very close to them. So the kid actually got on Google Maps and literally tracked out how many of these devices and these little things that he would pass by, and found out that the event location was in very, very close proximity to one of those, and was already experiencing physical symptoms. People can actually psychosymptomatically, I'm not saying that that's what happened, but you can actually make yourself sick, literally, by thinking. Literally, you can even make yourself pregnant. It's rare, right? It doesn't happen often, but it depends on your anatomy, of course. But you can actually think yourself into pregnancy. You can think yourself into sickness. And what I thought was so strange is that the father was really proud that his son was living in fear, and a substantial amount of fear, and pretty much was a mirror to the father's own mind. And I found it disturbing personally. You may disagree, and that's okay, but that's an example of how, if there were co-created worlds, and if you were to take that son and let them have independent thought, they might not have ever been nauseous and sick without that exposure to seeing the world in that way. And in fact, if you had no education whatsoever, I raise the question, would they then attribute that nausea to something else? You see what I mean? Like, in the absence of data, in the absence of education. Oh man, it must have been something we ate. Yeah, all those road trips. Yeah, it's maybe these restaurants, or, I don't know, maybe it's like food poisoning or something. I don't know. Or maybe it's the metal pointy things. I don't know. So that's what I mean when I say people are portals. Because the reality that you start to experience can actually be influenced by others. And if you are susceptible, or if you haven't made up your mind yet, I tend to be very, very stubborn in my personal belief systems, which is why I've had a couple close calls and not listening to my intuition, because I'm like, no, I see the best in I know they could go off the deep end, but they're probably not going to go off the, wait a second, this is weird. They're doing some weird, they're, oh my God, I know they're a lot closer than I thought they were. But it takes a lot for me to see that. And that's why I get embarrassed about that, because of my own inclination of seeing the world. But it gives me the freedom to be free, to travel freely, to travel around the world and feel safe, mostly. And so when you don't have that strength of a belief system, then you can get pulled into somebody else's world. And all of a sudden you're opening that door, you're walking through the threshold, and the reality that you're wiring your brain to experience may not be one that you're happy with. It could be one that you are happy with. And when you don't see clearly, then you get swept up in things like emotion or logic. And when you ignore the signs, and it can go both ways, right? It can be reality showing you that you are deserving, that you should go for it, that you are ready. That's one that I have sometimes. It's like, I'm not ready. And when the world is communicating to you, it's time, go for it. Go for your dreams. And you're like, no, I need to buy some better equipment. No, I need to do this. I need to do that. And then I'll be ready. And then you do those things. And then the universe is like, okay, you ready? And you're like, just a second. I need to take this trip first. And then I'm going to be ready. You see what I mean? It's because it comes from this underlying feeling and belief that you're not. So then, over time, you overwrite your experience of reality to then show you all the ways that you're not ready, or all the ways that you shouldn't trust, or all the ways that you should be afraid. And it's actually, for everybody, it's a little bit different. And I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, but what can happen is that you can have a commingling of a reality. You can be completely influenced and brought into other people's reality, or you can stand strong and create your own no matter what the outside world looks like. And that's what a lot of the teachers like Bashar and Abraham Hicks even, and others who say that the process of reality transformation and change comes before your outside world agrees. So you do kind of have to be a little delusional. Not in a bad way, but you have to hold this belief that no matter what the outside world looks like, that your reality is coming true and you're going to be okay. And no matter how much pressure you have to see it in one way versus another, you have to find that internal compass to sometimes stand strong against a flood. And you'll know, you will be able to feel it. And especially if there's a lot of propaganda campaigns or a lot of influencers or the majority, an overwhelming number of people that are getting you to co-create in a reality that you don't want necessarily, then it is incumbent upon you to have the discipline and the strength to disengage as best as you can. Because people are portals. And what that means is the closer you are to people who have certain karma, who have certain lessons, the more you're going to be personally affected by that. The closer you are to people who see reality in a warped way that makes you feel like you might be in a basement at some point or worse, then it's incumbent upon you to create that distance and to say no and to set boundaries and to select for the reality that you actually want to experience. Because with you as the captain of your ship, you as the creator of your reality, you have an amazing opportunity. We all do. But we have to be careful not to be blindsided and to understand what is our innate belief system, the way that we preferentially see the world. How does that help us? How does that hurt us? How is that just neutral? And what type of people are we associating with along the way? And what influencing effect do they have on us? Can they pull us down into the bog of sorrows? Yikes, who wants to go there? Come into my quicksand and my bog of sorrows, like in the labyrinth. We don't need to reenact some karmic lessons that aren't even anything about what you stand for, right? So why would you have somebody in your bedroom so close to you that treats people like that? Oh, they don't treat you like that yet. Well, just wait or not. GTFO.